All right. Well, again, I'm Steve Young and Bruce. Um, Welcome to this session. We're going to talk shorthand about knowledge rescue. And so the subtitle here, well, what's this knowledge that we want to rescue? So here's an attempt at going into that, and it's not advancing my slide when I want it to. There we go. I think we already covered housekeeping and a few introductory remarks. So Bruce will probably do another quick review later about how we're going to run our process. So um, let's talk about the so-called data information knowledge wisdom pyramid for a second. And I think ESIP's name says information, right? But we're a very data-centric organization, and so we're constantly talking about data, which is great. And data is like the raw material for everything else. But data by themselves are of limited value, in isolation. It's not a great analogy, but you could think about kind of an old school gold mine operation where you have a bunch of ore that's being mined, and the purpose of the exercise is not the ore. The purpose is to get out of the ore valuable, if it's gold mining gold, right? So data is the foundation for everything else, or data are, if you prefer that construct. From data, you can begin to develop information, and information derived from data begins to become meaningful to human beings. Like, you give me the raw data, that's not really meaningful to me. It's bits and bytes, it's numbers, but information that's taken out of the data, okay, now I could start, that starts to make sense to me. But there's a higher level, and this knowledge layer, if you will, is like, what can I do with the information, and how do I do it? Often knowledge starts to get you into the realm of models, for example, that are working with data and information and generating an actionable output. So as you go higher up, the actionability increases, arguably. And this is a construct, we're not going to try to dissect this. It's just a way to think about it. And there is sort of, you could argue that there's a wisdom on top of knowledge, where like the life experience, and people not only have the knowledge, but they have the sort of wisdom to apply that knowledge, for righteous action or whatever. So today we're going to talk primarily about the knowledge layer. And why do we care about knowledge? Well, let me go back for a second. A lot of knowledge has kind of gone out the door or been lost by the disruptions over the last now year and a half, roughly. The know-how that was in researchers' heads who were severed from their work, the know-how that they carried, the work in progress, projects that were underway, where all of a sudden the project was disrupted, and the paper hasn't been published. And now that researcher or other person has been sort of cast adrift, in effect. So what we really want to focus on today is, what can we do and how can we do it to try to rescue knowledge that's at risk of loss because of these disruptions? And it's kind of different. There's a lot of really great data rescue efforts underway, at least from what I can tell. A lot of players, a lot of work to rescue data. There seem to be some efforts that are thinking more about the knowledge aspect, and there's a certain parallel with doing oral history, for example, right? Trying to capture that historical perspective that individuals have. But we're going to try to talk about, is there something that we can do to contribute to saving knowledge that's at risk of loss because of everything that's happened? And my hypothesis is ESIP's got the smarts that there actually are some useful contributions that we can make in the space of rescuing or saving knowledge. So a few elements of an exercise like this, anything would have to be voluntary, obviously. Like if you're a researcher and you got laid off, it has to be voluntary on your part, whether you choose to engage in an effort like this or not. That's up to you. It should be non-extractive. There shouldn't be an extractive exercise that feels like taking advantage of people. And that's like easier said than done. It should be ethical. It should be respectful of the people involved and, their knowledge and experience and recognizing what they've been through. Of course, where you said it should be as open and fair as possible within provider established constraints. That means that if I'm the person who's participating and I'm providing knowledge, I should have some say-so in how open the knowledge that I provide is. Whether I say, I don't care, I'm freely offering it up to the world, or I want to have some constraints over access to what I'm telling you. And finally, just as a possible element, if we were to do this right, we would not only be saving or rescuing knowledge, but we would be helping the people too. So by way of example, I'm aware that people were separated from their positions and their email was immediately cut off, their work email. So all of a sudden, the ability for them to communicate with their network has been disrupted. And I think there's things that we could do potentially that would help provide a means for people to reconnect to each other and, possibly continue, or maybe down the road, they'd be able to get back to what they were doing that they feel passionate about, that they'd like to continue working on. So there could be an element of really literally helping affected people in this. So those are just a few thoughts about considerations. So how can we do this? This is where I'm going to turn the podium over to Bruce, and Bruce he'll again review a process that we're going to run.
Yeah, so. And we picked up another person. So can we get 3 people to move from where they are to the table there? Because we're working in table groups for participation. Can you move to a table? Or everyone move to your table? Yeah. 3 people or 2 other people. So there's a group of 3. Yeah. No, that's not good. Oh, okay. So we'll just stay where we are. Okay. All right. So another aspect of this, of course, is that within knowledge, there's a lot of different types of knowledge, including know-how, and and that's also know when and know why. Why do we have the data systems that we have now? What were the constraints? What were the enabling parts that got us to the data structures, the underlying software, all of the things that make up the the whole data system for Earth observation. And so there's a lot of practical knowledge management, and business schools go big on knowledge management. Well, we're just talking about what parts of the knowledge framework within your organization are vulnerable if, say, someone gets stolen by aliens or dismissed by the government, or whatever disruption there is. And then what do we do as ESIP, what is our purview to support these new Ronin individuals who have lost their original, jobs, and also retirement. ESIP is itself in the late 20s of its time, so a lot of early ESIPers are on retirement. And how do we celebrate people for their career? How do we get them to share the highlights of being a data scientist, working at an agency, or working at contracting with an agency, so that the next generation of people coming in can see that it's not all sort of weirdly dim and horrible, as it might seem.
Kind of related to that, here's some things that I learned that aren't really written down anywhere, but I learned some things about how to get things done that I'm happy to share. That's knowledge, it's undocumented, but it might be the outcome of many years of work. So like lessons learned, potentially very valuable knowledge that would be good to capture.
Right. So we're talking about about a new kind of data for ESIP, which is like the inventory of the people in and around ESIP that needs to be preserved, and also the roadway for new graduate students, new earth scientists to hop in. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to ask each of you to think of a personal disruption, or of a friend, someone who had personal disruption, and how that affected the transfer of knowledge within your organization, your network, or what you were doing. And we're going to do this for developing time. First, you take an internal, you take on your own for a minute. So that. Oh, all right. Okay, sorry. Think on your own, and I'll give you a minute to consider, and then I'll say time. And then you work with pairs, or a pair or three, and you tell each other what you considered, and then and that's 5 minutes, and then you bring it back to the table, and you pick out the what you think is the most shareable, salient aspects of what you just heard, and then we'll bring that to the room. Okay, and I will tell you, when it's time to go into couples, and time to go to the tables, and then it's time to come back to the room. Does that make sense?
Any questions about that?
Right. Okay. A personal disruption that happened either to you, or to someone you know, or someone you heard about with enough information to share, and what was the impact of that? Okay, so I'm gonna let you think about that for a minute. And on the web, are they getting the same information? Okay.
Thanks, good. And we can pause the recording now.
Yeah. All right.
Please tell us what that idea is, or react to what Bruce and I already said. So great.
I think Bruce has touched upon this, documenting history, having people do interviews in manners that they're comfortable with. My concern is like what happens to it in 5 years when Bruce has finally said that, yes, I actually am going to retire. I'm not going to fail at retirement again, or like when the current maintainers have moved on. Because that gets back to why we're having this conversation to begin with, right? It's like the loss of access to that knowledge. So, and also, yeah, the durable privacy, like long-term privacy, short-term and long-term privacy, short-term and long-term access, you know, documenting where the bodies are buried, you know, in a lot of ways. Like, why was this, you know, actually following through on the documentation? Like I said, I'm trying not to be negative, but because this is so important. It's so important to do. I also it's important to do right, but I also don't want striving for perfect to be the enemy of good enough. So finding that right balance of trying to do everything perfect, so we're not running into the same challenges that we've already talked about in what we're trying to do to prevent those, but not getting so caught up in trying to be perfect. So that's very rambly. I'm very sorry. My rambliness is high today.
I have some misgivings about interviews, especially for a lot of the federal participants. But I do think the biggest strength that ESIP has is its networking, its ability to connect complementary parties who have shared interests, shared issues. I was formerly a systems engineer, so I'm going to absolutely show my bias here and say maybe ESIP can have some sessions more focused on systems engineering and geospatial data management, because a lot of our issues are that we're all data scientists, we're all scientists, but there's not a whole lot of process and rigor necessarily equally applied in all of the earth sciences and data management. And if we all wrote down everything and kept it up to date in an accessible place, a lot of the troubles that we've all been experiencing might have been mitigated, right? My job the last year and change has been trying to piece that all together, write it all down, put it in, you know, the project repository and make sure that it's accurate, because it had been languishing for decades, right? And it's like, okay, so maybe we need a collective reminder that systems engineering is your friend and some common tools and practices. That might be a nice thing ESIP can offer.
I have another thought on interviews going along with what you said about them being problematic for federal employees. I also wonder about, you know, there needs to be a lot of trust with who's doing the interview, because otherwise people won't be honest about how they feel things work, right? Because you want to be able to document this doesn't work well, but right now we don't know how to change it. Or this person's really good at this, but maybe don't come to them, even though this is their title, don't come to them for this specific thing. And if that's documented somewhere, that's going to make that person feel bad. And even though you might not have meant it like that. So there just needs to be a lot of trust with the interviewer to make sure things get, you know, recorded in the best manner possible. Yeah, that's all.
I would agree with hesitation as a federal agency. I cringed at the moment that recording is activated again, message came on. I think you have definite concerns about privacy. You could not include by name, but if I mention things that I'm working on, you would know I'm one of 4 people. And I think that's the boundary here. There are things where we can gain knowledge from these interviews by talking about topics in general. I've learned a lot about physical samples from you, system engineering, data citations, web services. Like, there are things that are applicable to the community as a whole. But if you start to get into our agency specific questions or issues, I think that's out of bounds of ESIP, in my opinion.
Well, and I know we're focusing a little bit like on the privacy concerns with federal. I've worked like the past 3-4 years. I've essentially worked in the corporate world where you're subject to NDAs and proprietary knowledge, and there are ways to be more as open as possible, but there can be challenges, you know, and I do very specific things, you know, even if like being very careful how you could, there would need to be an incredibly high level of trust in the anonymization of the information. And I'm not even sure if we could anonymize it enough. Right. The pool's too small. Yeah.
We just say one thing. Another part of these interviews is celebrating, you personally celebrating your life. What is where you were just talking about, you know, in a non-disclosure way, what was best about your work over time.
And I do think we'll come to you, Carla, in a second. I think we'll go here first and then you, if that's okay. I can think of one individual whom I will not name, but I think that individual would freely be very open and vocal about knowledge and the work the individual has done. But that's that individual and that person's personality and choice, you know, to be kind of out there. And yeah, a lot of people are not going to be in that situation where they definitely. Yeah. So yes. I thought you two were. Well, we'll go with Carla. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to put on my education researcher hat because this is not uncommon at all in educational research. We want to anonymize everything. And then often surveys, when I know we're thinking of an interview, but there might be a very careful survey instrument that could be done. I recently did a bunch of think aloud interviews with subjects, but I'm going through and anonymizing everything, their names, context specific things can be taken out. You're kind of want to look at are there broad themes that cut across this work? I know it's sort of like, the best thing is, can you do a case study, right? You want to study this and you want to really get all the subtle nuances, but that may not work in the federal environment. So there's on one end of the spectrum is the case study. The other end of the spectrum is the survey that just maybe isn't worth it at all because it's so generic. But in the middle is the combination of anonymizing data. And I think of data as interviews, as, you know, not only just the little data points that all of us scientists collect, but, you know, it's data when you're getting this information from people. And so it does need some kind of metadata, but we have to do stick with human subjects requirements in my work, which means you don't want to give the detail that would. So like, I remember one time thinking that I know this school. They were like a school in the Southwest that does whatever. And I was saying, I'm pretty sure I know it. And then I was in school at the time and a faculty said, you know, if the researcher does it well, you think that's the school down your street that they're describing, but it's any school because it's the things that happen in that place that then rise up. So maybe that's just a reframing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, I was getting kind of like.
And nothing that anyone has to say is bad or invalid. This is more of a brainstorming kind of thing. And one other thing to think about while we keep going is platform ideas. Like whatever we generate, potentially thoughts about what platform or platforms would be appropriate to house products. So I just want to throw that out there too. Okay.
I'm on a different thought here. Kind of stepping back and thinking about in my work, we have students, postdocs, people coming in and out all the time. And that's something that you know when the deadline is. And same with somebody who's going to retire. They make an announcement and you know that's going to happen. Projects come and go. You have startups and they last for short periods or long periods. And so there's a deadline for those. And so we have people who are collecting information and then they leave. What we don't have everything from them. So just for me, it's like trying to even implement for the planned departures of people and the closeout of projects. What do you do when you close out? I mentioned these long-term projects, and I've been trying to find guidance on how do you bundle this up and share this knowledge? Yeah. So
sorry, on the NASA end and for the Earth science missions, I mean, it's it's really specific into like geospatial missions and when those missions end, how do you do data preservation? What materials do you need to preserve and for how long and which ways? But those are very specific instructions that could definitely, I think, have more wide sweeping, generalized, you need to be able to have the materials to reproduce your data set, right? Like if you did any kind of processing, you need to not only have the algorithm that did that processing, but the pieces of software and the libraries and the versions to be able to run that algorithm again, stuff like that.
just so that it's sort of when you leave, you have an exit interview, like if you're in a permanent position with a HR department, but there needs to be an exit interview if you have a planned event. Now, I understand if it's not a planned event and all of a sudden everything goes away, there's a whole other scenario of things, but at least you've got something in mind for closure. And maybe you have an hour or maybe you have to do something. So just stepping back a little bit is just, I'm asking if there's a process for when it's planned.
So kind of following up on that, a role I could see ESIP having is being a collection site for those types of processes, for project closures, like what are some leading practices? What are some norms? For different federal agencies, for private companies, for startups, for things like that, as well as maybe helping develop kind of regular waypoints during a project of like kind of mini not really a closure, but hey, it would be a really good idea if you ran like a mini closure type of exercise every 6 months. So in case something happens, you already have the documentation. And so helping develop maybe some leading practices along that line. And by the way, if you heard me say leading and rather than best, because best implies done. So I prefer the term leading practices. Yeah, because best, right. So leading practices implies that that's the best you know or the best you can actually implement.
So you're saying ESIP could maybe get a grant from Sloan to run a workshop with federal agency or whatever to better do interviews along the way internally that has nothing to do with the content, but just the process. Cool.
This is good stuff. Keep going.
And I think that's really the last part of this is what should ESIP not do is the other side of it. I mean, a lot of this, it should be done internally, right? I mean, it should be like the grant that Sloan did for the repository, checklist of are you doing things right with the data to do it. It's sort of like personnel, what do you call it? Pre information gathering. I mean, you have the exit interviews. Are exit interviews commonly actually happen?
So when I was laid off, like they actually, because of the type of relationship I had and the type of company I was working with, I knew a month ahead of time that I was getting laid off. And so we essentially had a month long exit interview and I had the time to do the transition. But I also know that that was unusual. But I also know that everybody else that has been laid off from that company in the past year has had some sort of exit interview. But we also know that that's not necessarily the best. That's not necessarily what's also often happening. It's certainly not happening at federal agencies when you lose access to your computer like immediately, kind of thing. You're not going to get an exit interview. Yeah.
There's different levels and fidelity of exit interviews too. There's the management exit interview, there's the colleague exit interview, there's the project, exit interview, there's the transitionary, and you might catch one of those and be like, all right, check, and everyone else is left hanging.
Mostly they just wanted to go through a checklist to make sure I didn't have any library books that I was leaving with. And there wasn't really any serious attempt at knowledge capture associated with the process. That's right. I did have to turn in my office key. Yeah. Other thoughts? Is there? I mean, okay.
I mean, the other side of this is something I like how the exit interviews and that kind of information is generalized inside your job. It's not something ESIP needs to do. We don't need to do exit interviews for people who are retiring, but we do want to celebrate ESIP members for the part they played in ESIP and for their stories that would help ESIP uplift and also get more funding from the partner agencies about what is the value of ESIP been in your career and to your the knowledge sharing within your agency too.
We all know that AI is happening and changing a lot of things. Is there anything that we should be thinking about given where AI is at right now that could apply to capturing knowledge, subject to the parameters that, we already kind of went over? I saw, yeah.
Not going to be anything terribly substantive. And probably a lot of people feel the same way. But I think working in and around federal agencies, I think sometimes people get very excited about using AI anywhere you possibly can. And no one asks why you're using AI there. Exactly. But people, maybe not people here, other people. So, and again, I'm not in any kind of management position. I'm not part of any of these conversations. But as I'm sure we all think, it's very much thinking about AI can be a tool that you use to accomplish tasks. It's not AI is doing the research and AI has produced content. It's I'm using this to get things done more efficiently. Anyway. Oh, here we go.
So in the trying to map all of what we have and where, I have used some AI tools to be like, can you summarize the directory contents for this whole drive? And the results are not what you want them to be. It's helpful, but you still have to go and read through it all because it's only half of it, and it's not trustworthy still.
I use AI to do the pyramid. That's stop it. I tried to get it to fix itself, and it didn't fix itself. So I had to manually change the thing.
We're checking to see if the online participants want to have the final word.
I could almost picture prompting an LLM to lead, to sort of do a guided, somewhat adaptive interview with a, let's say, a subject matter expert in a manner. One of the other challenges I think potentially would be, what if we took this on and it actually was working? How would we scale? Given that, ESIP is basically pretty much a volunteer organization, how could you, because there's literally thousands, I mean, probably more like hundreds of thousands of disrupted people out there who have a lot of valuable knowledge. But so scaling, how could you scale? And that's an example where I could picture AI playing a role in, doing a guided adaptive interview with someone. But yes.
I have a different way that you can scale that kind of thing, a train the trainer type of scenario where, we develop it, we, kind of help develop those leading practices, share that knowledge of leading practices to other people who can then implement them. So we're not doing it. We're providing the resources to allow other people to do it. And I think that's actually something ESIP tends to do very well. So kind of a carpentry type setup.
I do think also, though, while there is a lot that you can do with documentation and leading resources for others, there's a really big part of it that is going to come down to individual people making the decision to mentor people and provide knowledge. Because a lot of the stuff we talk about, like, all of the interrelationship things, that's not, even besides the privacy concerns, a lot of those are so specific to an organization and a team and different work styles. And sometimes the knowledge is like, computer 3 will not connect to the printer. Don't print it. Just don't do it. Use a different one. And it's except for on Thursdays. And yeah. And like, it's kind of dumb, but it actually does really save a lot of time and effort when you know these things. And so I think it's all helpful. I think it's really good to, like I said, promote this and celebrate people's careers and get that. But I think the biggest thing is building this kind of, expectation of, these are things I can communicate to new people coming in and pass it down. And hopefully they feel like doing that too. But even if it's just a generation or two of people that have this more knowledge, that's a generation or two of people that are just hitting the ground a little bit ahead of where everyone else had to. Right. So, yeah.
I think the role that ESIP can help play there is helping encourage that type of culture, like at ESIP, that type of culture that you then bring back to your organization to help encourage those sorts of things. So,
I know I've only been here for 6 whole minutes because my day job does not stop even while I'm here, unfortunately. But and then another phone call after that. But regarding interviews, I think it's important to remember that interviews should not be one-sided. They should be bidirectional, as in, even in an exit interview, when a person is asking questions of the person leaving should be comfortable asking questions of the interviewer so that that person can get valuable feedback from their questions. Makes a lot more sense if you're interviewing for a job, so you know what you're getting into, but it's not really the purpose of this. But I think it's important that if the interviewer is just asking a set of questions from a predefined list, it's going to limit what they're going to capture. So opening up to allowing for the person leaving to ask questions could potentially provide more information that otherwise would just be ignored.
You have an exit interview and an exit, yeah, but also part of that is, okay, do a job description for someone that's incoming.
Is there anything, we're approaching the end of our time. Is there anything any of you wish we had talked about that we haven't touched on, or anything you don't think we really captured that we should have captured? Just want to give an opportunity as we approach the end here. Any
this is more of a question, but mentioning mentorship before. So this is my first time attending ESIP. I'm new to this whole scene. I've done plenty of open source data and all that, but never really dove into the ESIP community before. So I was just wondering, does ESIP have a program in place for mentors to find mentees and vice versa? Because NASA has plenty of opportunities like that. Even internationally, I'm pen pals with someone who works at the European Space Agency. So we can talk a little bit about, your differences and how things work over there versus here. So I was wondering, does ESIP already have that in place? And if so, is there a way to maybe build off of that a little bit more to, kick off some of what we've talked about here?
This is a good one. There's fourth ever at one time.
We don't have a program, but we have the most noisy conversations in our meetings, and people are open and willing to talk about, what they don't know. It's because we build a culture of trust, and you can come to a table conversation and say, I'm having an issue with Claude Code not doing this or that, and someone will. So it's a little bit bi-directional than just standard mentoring, but it's just dive in. It's a mosh pit of information.
Yeah, it's like a great culture. It seems to me that nothing about legally over where you need to be, but there isn't a structure. I mean, the culture is fabulous, and there's a lot of opportunity for the informal, but the more consciously.
That's essentially what I was going to say, is that there is not a formal structure. The closest we have to that is actually our community fellows program. That's the closest ESIP currently has to like a formal mentorship mentee program, but maybe it is something that we could look at implementing a little bit more and look at it maybe not as a mentor mentee, but as a bi-directional knowledge sharing.
Well, it's great, Kelsey. If there's some angle related to
You're not crazy to bring that up. I love that idea. So I'm a second year community fellow, and along with Jolene. And when we started this year, we were talking with Alicia about how we can build better synergies between both like grad student and early career professionals and ESIP. Because a lot of the heavy hitting fellows from my cohort were like, I got to finish my PhD. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if ESIP could help them finish their PhD? Like they could write a chapter with their cluster, or their cluster get something done faster because they've got a grad student like wholeheartedly working on it. But the reason I wanted to talk most is because at 4:00 today, we have our session about reimagining that. And if you don't already have a plan for 4:00, please do come. It will be kind of similar in structure to this. And I do think you guys have really cool ideas. So.
All right. Thank you. All right. I guess we're ready to roll. So just a quick last word.
So the education committee is trying to interact with all of the other clusters and committees. We've been trying to do that for the last 10 years. But I also, anytime I see someone young, I try to mentor that person, but sometimes they're pulled away because they're not allowed anymore to participate in ESIP because they're not at that level of their career. Someone else is controlling their job and their time. So I don't know what to do about that, but I do think that it's mentoring within a cluster or community, trying to get more people is a really good thing. It's been valuable.
All right. Well, I think we are ready to adjourn. Thank you, all of you, very much for coming and participating. And, I think we both feel like this is very helpful, productive, and plus, hopefully, you had a little bit of almost fun or even actual fun doing the process. So, thanks, and enjoy the rest of ESIP.